Good morning all, and welcome to the State of the Service Roadshow event for the Northern Territory. My name is Gerrit Wanganeen and I'll be your MC and facilitator today. Thank you everyone for joining us online today. And before I begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians, on whose country I present from today, being the Riratingu clan of the Yolngu Nation. And I pay my respects to their elders past and present. And I'd like to extend that acknowledgement to the traditional custodians on whose country that you are participating in today. Unfortunately, due to some scheduling issues for our Auslan interpreters, they're unable to join us today. So if you do require captions, the team are sharing instructions on how to do so now. This session is also being recorded and captioned for viewing past the event. Now, an overview of how today will run. To start, we'll be using Slido for some public service trivia, and then a keynote address will be delivered by the Australian Public Service Deputy Commissioner, Subho Banerjee, followed by a short panel discussion, and then your questions will be answered by the panel. All questions can be submitted by the Q&A function on the Slido chat. There is a QR code on the screen now that will take you to Slido. Simply take out your mobile and scan the code, or you can also enter the number on the screen at Slido's website to join from your browser. For those of you who are on the site, you should see the first question now. So there's 20 seconds on the clock to answer before we show the correct answer. So this should be a little bit of public service trivia. Okay, so the answer to the most popular male name in the Australian Public Service is David. We should start to see the second question up there now. So the answer to the most popular female name of public service in the Northern Territory is Karen. So what's the average age of an Australian public servant in the Northern Territory? So the average age is 44. And what are the top 3 most common countries of birth outside of Australia for the Northern Territory APS employees? And so the answer to the most common countries of birth is England, Sudan, and the Philippines. So very interesting statistics and tidbits there. And so thanks to everyone who played along. I'll now invite Subho Banerjee, the Australian Public Service Deputy Commissioner, to deliver the keynote address for today. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Gerrit. Obviously disappointed that neither Gerrit nor Subho was the quiz winner there on the most popular male name, but we can continue to hope. It's great to join you all today. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which I'm coming to you from today, the Ngunnawal people here in Canberra, and pay my respects to their elders past and present, and also extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people on the call and in the APS more broadly. It really is a wonderful opportunity to join you today. I'm a little bit sad not to be able to join you in the Northern Territory. It's always fantastic to have a chance to visit, and I look forward through this position, which I've recently been appointed to get the chance to come to the Northern Territory again and connect with public servants in the NT. It is really such an important part of the public service that it has a genuinely national footprint. And so we're delighted to have the chance to talk to you today in terms of this Northern Territory Roadshow, but also to acknowledge and understand and have a conversation about the circumstances in which public servants work all the way around the country, and to get some further conversation about that. I'm going to provide some initial remarks just about coming from the state of the service and thinking a little bit more broadly about where the APS is up to, and then I'm really looking forward to being involved in the broader panel conversation as we go with Gina and Katrina and Gerrit, of course. So let me begin by saying the APS operating environment is complex. I think it ever was thus, but in the last year, of course, we're conscious that the impacts of the ongoing economic and social challenges from COVID-19 still loom large. There have been natural disasters in many different parts of the country, including, of course, in the Northern Territory and in the top end of Western Australia. Recent geopolitical disruptions across the world, and we're also competing in a tight labour market for staff amongst a national skills shortage. To address these and build a public service for the future, the government has indicated a series of objectives for its APS reform agenda. It wants to make sure that the APS embodies integrity in everything it does, puts people and businesses at the centre of policy and services, is a model employer, and has the capability to do its job well. Now, it's a long-running APS reform agenda. I think we're all committed in the service to think about how to build the service over time. Our stewardship responsibility is to think about the APS as an enduring national institution. And so we need to continue to do the work to build trust, collaborate, learn, make sure that it is a great place to work, and to meet the challenges of an increasingly complex and interconnected world. One of the points I wanted to highlight today is the work of the APS Academy, which is one of the areas that I'm now responsible for in the APSC. The Academy, in concept, is a way of really focusing attention on building capability all the way across the public service. The idea is really to think about what is it that we need to perform at our absolute best as public servants. What constitutes excellence as a public service and as an individual public servant, and how can you be supported to do the best job that you possibly can? Now, part of that is about thinking about the specific requirements of being a public servant, what we call the domains of the APS craft. So what are the things that are very particular to working as a public servant that mean that you're really pursuing the vocation and the service of public service? And then as we're thinking about that, what are the skills required and how can you be supported to make sure that you can develop those skills, both in terms of your current job, but also in terms of building a broader skill set that is helpful in terms of your broader journey through time in the public service. One of the things that we're really focused on is that we think of that through a continuous learning model. That's not just about formal learning through coursework, it's much, much broader than that. It's really about making sure that you can connect to people in the workplace, that you can learn from people in an apprenticeship manner to understand what really counts, what are the subtleties and judgments that you require to be effective as a public servant, what are the other resources you can draw on, how can you really connect to external sources of knowledge and expertise and understanding, as well as formal learning and development as we go. I encourage you to visit the APS Academy website that details a lot of the opportunities that are available in terms of developing APS craft, and also that talk about some of the supporters or enablers, such as digital offerings and other ways of having conversations about APS craft. It's a way of being reflective about what you're being asked to do and how you can get better at it over time. When we talk about APS craft, at the core of that is integrity. And really, integrity has to be absolutely central to our duty as public servants. That is really what marks us out. That's what makes being a public servant different to being in the not-for-profit sector, in the private sector, in some other sector of society or the economy. We operate in the public trust. We serve the government of the day. We work with ministers in partnership who are then in turn accountable to the Parliament. So we need to be very, very clear about what that involves for our work. We need to be clear about the appropriate use of taxpayer money. We need to be clear about being transparent about decision making. We need to understand that we occupy a particular place as a democratic institution in that broader context of a Westminster tradition here. So the APSC is putting a lot of work into integrity in particular, making sure that there is a clear understanding of what the requirements are as a public servant. And again, there's a lot of material available on the Academy website that provides guidance with regard to integrity offerings. Integrity is a really key part of how senior leadership in the APS think about leadership behaviours. The Secretaries Board have issued a charter of leadership behaviours which sets out their expectations for APS leadership. This is an absolutely key document. Again, I'd recommend that you have a look at it online. It's very accessible, but it's very clear about the expectations of public servants and what our senior leaders expect of us in our everyday work. Importantly, that applies to senior leaders themselves, who are often required to exercise judgment in quite difficult circumstances, but it applies all the way across the service and at all levels. We're really interested in, focused on thinking about leadership at all levels, providing guidance, providing support, but also expecting people to exercise responsibility at different levels in the public service. One of the things that really shines through in the Charter of Behaviours is that sense of a broader spirit of service. And I would highlight for you that a second exhibition is due to open this year in the Museum of Australian Democracy here in Canberra at Old Parliament House, which celebrates the spirit of service and is focused particularly on the role of the public service in broader national life. So one of the main challenges that I highlighted in the initial remarks were really what are we doing in terms of the broader workforce to make sure that we have an appropriately skilled and capable workforce, that we are competitive in recruitment, that we can get people to be able to work in the roles that we need in a timely way and in a reasonable kind of planning sense of what we're going to need into the future. The APS Workforce Strategy 2025 is supporting a cultural shift in strategic workforce planning. And to do that, it's supported by a Centre of Excellence based in the APSC on workforce planning. As well as thinking about that across the whole of the service, there's also work being done on various specialist streams, including the professions of data, digital and human resources. We're also thinking about how we can open up a range of different pathways. Two recent initiatives to strengthen attraction is the Affirmative Action Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Recruitment Hub and the Affirmative Measure Disability Employment Recruitment Hub, which have both been launched in recent months. A lot of the focus is really about the future of work. How do we look over the horizon? How do we anticipate where we like to go? And how do we position the APS best to be able to operate in that environment? We need to broaden the way we attract a talented and diverse workforce. We need to understand that a diverse workforce is more productive and more effective. And how do we encourage people to apply and work for us? And how do we recruit into a range of different roles? That might be for a short period of time, it might be for a longer period of time. People can make a contribution in a range of different ways. And so we also need to think about mobility, both within the service, but also in and out of the service. We need to think about much more flexible ways of operating. To enhance our employee value proposition, we're doing some work around options around location and flexibility, and we're also really looking to highlight the vocation of public service. What is really special about what can be done as a public servant? And I think in the panel, often it's very likely through the Q&A we can talk a little bit more about what we've found particularly special about being public servants. And we're also doing some work to support an APS-wide approach to flexibility through the Secretary's Board. In closing, I'm sure 2023 will continue to be a big year for the Australian Public Service. We're really looking to support you to continue to do the amazing work that you're doing all the way across the country, but would also urge you to think about how you can take care of yourselves and one another through that journey. Thank you again for tuning in today, and I'm looking forward to participating in the panel.
Thank you, Subho. The State of the Service Roadshow is an annual occasion where we come together and talk through our ideas for the public service, but we can also share our stories and our experiences. The Australian Public Service Commission is capturing some of these stories and will now show a small trailer of some of the stories captured so far.
My name is Leanne. I'm based in Canberra. I work at the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet, and this is my story.
Hello, my name is Ben.
My name is Sunam Safar.
My name's Hannah.
My name is Mohammed Al Abri.
I'm Grant Nicholson.
My name is Robin Edmonds.
My name's Andrew Pfeiffer.
Hey there, my name is Belle Hogg.
My name is Megan Kopatz, and this is my APS story. So I got to talk to different agencies, see inside their cultures and their initiatives and what they were doing, and I thought, wow, there's so much going on in the APS. I really need to broaden my horizons.
Starting out in service delivery, taking calls from Australians who were unemployed and hearing some stories that broke my heart, and that really started off a very rewarding time being able to help the Australian public, and that hasn't changed.
There's plenty of opportunity around now. They've got a thing called a development register, that if you're interested in developing your career and working your way up from maybe as a team leader.
I continue to learn and share all around government through the amazing communities that I've been involved with. There's a thing called the Digital Profession, and I'm running a visual scribing community. So we have local, state, federal, all kinds of different government agencies, departments that come together.
The advice that I would give to people is do experience time in other organisations. It's well worth it to expand your horizons and to go and spend time discovering what other agencies do and sharing your talent around. But at the same time, if you're comfortable in the organisation you're adding value there. There is value for the organisation in you staying for a period of time in the organisation.
Bring like-minded people together. We share webinars, we bring in speakers, and we hold events like clothes swaps. The next big event we're trying to hold is an APS-wide event for Clean Up Australia Day on the 5th of March 2023. We hope to see you there.
I started up their neurodiversity network, which grew to 400 members in 1 year. And I was super thrilled that the ATO supported me in co-founding their network.
And so we decided to bring people together for a bit of a meeting just to explore what it was that agencies were already doing, what they were maybe aware of, what they thought were opportunities and what they really wanted to learn. So we kind of wanted to have this exploratory meeting just to, I guess, gauge the level of interest and maturity, if you will, right, with neurodiversity awareness and inclusion across the APS.
So there was so much support because I was at the learning stage. People were there to support me, help me, gave me like the network and development opportunities, but within APS 6 is something I have to find on my own. But it's really amazing and challenging for me because this was something I was looking for, that where I can challenge myself, get out of the comfort zone, and maybe an inspiration for others.
My highlight was definitely the evaluation workshop I led, because it directly led to the agency changing its HR processes in a meaningful way, so I thought it was very impactful. My key takeaway from this whole experience work on the project is that each and every person has power to create change.
Some very interesting stories there, and just a snippet of, I guess, the breadth of the Australian public service as it stands. So we'll move now into our panel discussion. So a reminder, if you've got a question for the panel, please send it through via the Slido question and answer chat function. And if you do see a question that you would like to ask or hear the answer to, you can like the question on the app to vote it up, and therefore the more votes, the more likely the questions will be answered. So I'll introduce our panelists now. So we have joining us Katrina Zander, who is the National Manager at Services Australia, normally based up in Darwin, and Gina Cass-Gottlieb, Chair at the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission. So thanks for joining us today, and you've met Subho already. So we've got a couple of questions to start off our discussion before we turn to those that are coming through on Slido. So the first question to the panel is, the APS Jobs Mobility Platform provides opportunities for people to work across team and agencies in different locations without actually leaving their current location. How do you see this enabling staff capability uplift? I might throw that one to you, Gina, to start with, and then we can go from there.
Thanks very much, Gerrit. So first, I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the lands, waterways and skies across Australia. Today, I happen to be in Ngunnawal country, also known as Canberra, and I acknowledge their elders, past, present and emerging, their cultures and their significant contribution to the lands and the way we work and live and relax. So the mobility platform is now folded into the ACCC internal jobs advertising. It's a deeply ingrained part of our culture to support mobility, so people can refresh and grow their skills, share their experience and expertise, and see different ways of operating, engaging with other people and other jobs within our service, increase innovation across the service and help the ACCC and APS as a whole retain great people. The ACCC has people all over the country, and we relish the new opportunities this provides and for our ability to draw talent from elsewhere, also from other parts of the service. We are fortunate to have offices in Darwin, Townsville, Melbourne, Sydney, Canberra, Adelaide, Hobart, Brisbane and Perth. For an organisation our size, this gives us a great geographical and community spread. Our Darwin team are crucial to much of our work and the way in which we go about it. In recent times, employees in our Darwin office have worked across the whole gamut of the ACCC work, including consumer and small business outreach, investigations about conduct within the territory and across the country, on our inquiry into digital platforms and their influence in the life of Australians, our work on telecommunications, our data services area, our IT, and in our finance team, for example. Importantly, too, our work nationally is deeply informed by the work and insights of our Darwin team and their engagement with NT communities. The ACCC's First Nations outreach team is largely located in our Darwin office. The team sits within our Consumer and Fair Trading Division and includes outreach officers as well as investigators. While the investigations team are involved in a broad range of consumer protection matters, it has a specific focus on NT-related matters and matters that fall within our enduring priority of conduct impacting First Nations Australians. Learnings from those direct communications by our outreach team with members of First Nations communities is shared throughout the Commission and informs all our work, and is integral in informing a range of work relevant to First Nations Australians. I thought I'd give you two examples. Recent examples include informing submissions to the Productivities Commission's report into Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander visual arts and crafts, and the inquiry into food pricing and food security in remote communities. Also facilitating direct collaboration with First Nations communities to gain important insight for inquiries. Recent examples have been inquiries we've been doing into regional mobile infrastructure and the accessibility and service that's available in remote communities. Thanks very much, Gerrit.
Thanks, Gina. Katrina, did you want to?
Yes, thanks, Gerrit. And I too pay my respects to the traditional custodians of the lands of which I'm meeting with you today, the Arnhem people here in Alice Springs. Pay my respects to all elders, past and present, of all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander nations. My first thought when the APS Jobs Mobility Board was released was, wow, what an opportunity to get different exposure and experience to what might be available where you normally work. I think that's really important when we live somewhere like the Northern Territory and have smaller range of programs and a smaller workforce in general to what we might find in other states. It's also an opportunity to be part of specific government initiatives as they're stood up from time to time, and the opportunity to expand your networks and influence through working with others beyond your usual work group. I think all of those things add to your capabilities in your APS public service toolbox, as Subho referred to earlier. I also see value, and Gina has touched on this, I see value in another direction for the Jobs Mobility Board and how we're lifting capability. And that would be for our colleagues right across the country that develop policy and design programs to be able to access the knowledge and experience that you have from delivering or managing at the user end. And that Jobs Mobility Board provides a great platform to seek contributors for short-term specific use in that way, without the need for you to leave where you are and to leave those valuable connections that we can leverage off in completing those pieces of work. Another example I can share, all of us as APS leaders in the Northern Territory know the difficulties of recruiting people with the skill sets we need sometimes. The Mobility Board is just a great way where we can connect with people to meet a particular business need, but also to help lift the capabilities of our teams as they share that experience when they're working with us and bring our teams along on that journey. Again, you need to engineer the right ways of operating within your team to ensure that that sharing and knowledge sharing experience occurs. But it's a wonderful opportunity to bring greater knowledge, diversity and experience into your team.
Thanks, Katrina. Subho, is there anything that you would like to add to that?
Gerrit, I'll just be very brief because they were both fantastic answers. If I just pick up a little bit of what Katrina said though, there's two-way benefit. Like I think it's absolutely a kind of richness that comes from the sharing of experience and understanding. And I think a lot of the benefit of mobility is really that kind of broadening of experience and the two-way part of the conversation. And then for the individual who gets the mobility opportunity, it definitely fits with the continuous learning model that I was talking about before. That one of the most effective ways to grow your skill set is to work in a different way, work in a different place, work in a different set of work, and just see a bit of a different view of the world. And I think that can be really powerful. And to try and make it easier for people to do that, to support people while they're doing that, I think is a fantastic initiative and really builds on the strength of the APS as being a genuinely national institution with a bit of scale, which should allow us to do this kind of thing.
Thanks, Subho. And I guess from my perspective, just quickly as well, just adding in there, one of the things that I've been lucky enough to see when we've had outplaced officers effectively within NIAA is that the local staff get a real understanding about how policy is developed, and in some ways that gets spread through the office by a bit of osmosis as well. So the tea room conversations and those sorts of things do go to how your work is going and what's going on with it. The discussions at Ben's Bakery can be why why is Canberra making these sort of calls when, if we've got people with policy experience, we understand where some of those things are coming from, and it's not just becoming a Canberra solo thing. So thank you. The second question that we have here is that staff have answered in the census that work-life balance and work satisfaction are two of the most important qualities in their work. So what advice can you share with teams to help create a culture where this is a focal point? I'll throw to you, Katrina, if you'd like to start off.
Thanks, Gerrit. What a great question, and really topical, coming out of all of the lessons of COVID and different working arrangements that we in the APS needed to quickly innovate and engineer and find solutions to technical problems to make all of that happen at that time. In terms of creating a culture where work-life balance and work satisfaction are key focal points, I think it's really important to understand from the people you work with what that means to them. Quite often when we talk about work-life balance, for instance, people assume that that all means the same thing to different people, whereas it can mean quite different things. I know through conversations in my own agency and with my own teams, work-life balance can mean anything from the opportunity to work at home or the opportunity to work different types of work hours to what we might consider are our sort of standard operating hours, or the flexibility to work from different locations from time to time to be able to meet other outside work obligations and opportunities. So really being able to define what work-life balance looks like for people and the different circumstances that they might find themselves in. One of the challenges for us as APS leaders, I think, is managing some practicalities that go with that. So certainly in Services Australia, where I work, we have a range of public-facing offices where the doors have to open every day, and we need to serve the customers that come in. So how we think about and manage and can apply work-life balance or greater flexibility in working arrangements has some really practical challenges that we need to be able to work through with individuals around that. Technology, digital servicing and a range of other things certainly helping us to expand our thinking and expand the opportunities that come along with that. I would say the same for job satisfaction. There's plenty of data that probably tells us back in times where our parents and grandparents might have been in the workforce, monetary remuneration and workplace conditions were things that contributed to people's job satisfaction, but they weren't the be-all and end-all of that satisfaction. And we know now that people entering the workforce for the first time are looking for greater social impact and the opportunity to influence and have an effect over social and emotional impacts and well-beings across all citizens and agencies. So even the definition of job satisfaction might challenge what some of us older folk around the APS might think about these days. And I think that's just an ongoing conversation, Gerrit, for all of us to keep having with our workforce as it evolves.
Thanks, Katrina. Gina, did you want to add anything there?
Sure, thanks, Gerrit. And I think that Katrina covered really important points, including that flexibility and satisfaction mean different things for every one of us, and we need to be alert to that. If I start with our emphasis in our employee value proposition is to bring in the right candidates, support them and provide opportunities for growth and development so they achieve work satisfaction and it grows and develops as they grow and develop. It certainly has a real focus on an inclusive workplace, a flexible workplace, so that people are working on matters that are meaningful to them, and they challenge themselves and have the opportunity to make a significant and lasting impact. If I take examples from our Darwin-based First Nations outreach team, they have a nationwide focus and also work and have a key part of it are territory communities and issues. So they are visiting and meeting with regional and remote communities, including those in the Greater Darwin area, Arnhem Land, Daly River region, Katherine region, Cox Peninsula and Central Australia, but also into other areas like the Kimberley region and the APY lands. They do that together with other agencies as well in the APS and also at the state level, so NT Consumer Affairs and a range of local First Nations council groups and legal groups like the Top End Women's Legal Service and Financial Counsellor Services. They have made contributed to real change for communities, including in relation to, you may be aware of in the NT, the public outcomes such as in relation to the Telstra unconscionable conduct and the Ruby art matter. In terms of this supportive, purpose-filled and balanced work environment, we are also very conscious that people need the capacity to be with family, be with community, and be able to grow and develop and support family and community, as well as being able to achieve this satisfaction in their lives. We're very focused on new hybrid and flexible working frameworks and a culture strategy that gives people great guide rails and develops leaders to be conscious of and supportive of flexibility. Looking at it, some of our recent flexibility initiatives have included creating a role of flexibility champion who has specifically been tasked to test the status quo and support new thinking and initiatives. We support job share arrangements, including at our most senior levels. We've adopted recruit anywhere requirements for our jobs, leading to remote teams across all cities and beyond. We support condensed hours for most roles. And taking, Katrina was referring to it, the pandemic positives, we're allowing our people to continue to work from home on an average 3 days a week with additional flexibility for those with individual requirements. So we want to take the approach that we have a diverse, inclusive workplace with the best people for the job, working wherever they're choosing to work, in the offices or locations they're choosing to work, so that they can contribute to that spirit of service that Subho was referring to, and to grow and develop in their roles. Thanks very much, Gerrit.
Thanks, Gina. Subho, is there anything that you wanted to add before I quickly...
Thanks, Gerrit. So again, just briefly, I think it's important through these conversations to be thinking about a mutual benefit and really to be thinking about that across the individual, the team and the organisation. There are legitimate parts of that conversation across all three of those. So I think, as we've talked about, we need to be respectful of different individual circumstances and aspirations, and that might be quite different in different places. We need to be really mindful of the effective operation of teams, and in many ways this flexible work conversation is really shining a spotlight on some fundamentals of running teams well. You've got to have really clear, open communication. You've got to have an understanding of roles and responsibilities. You've got to have a bit of team spirit, a bit of sense of how people are going to cover and how you can have a bit of give and take and how you can connect in the right way and how you can build a bit of trust. And then the organisational level is also important. There are legitimate and reasonable reasons why organisations think about culture, think about what the purpose is. I've talked about integrity in particular, the sense of what it means to be a public servant. So it's important to balance across all three of those levels and to have respectful and open conversations in a way that looks to apply flexibility whenever we possibly can, understanding that that means different things in different jobs as well, as Katrina was saying.
Thanks, Subho. And I just wanted to add to that, from my perspective, certainly it's job satisfaction and work-life balance quite often come down to individual preferences too, and they are things that do change over time. So I completely agree with what Subho said about making sure there's an understanding of organisationally what needs to be done, and the work and the type of work that needs to be done, but then also understanding the individuals within the team and where they're at. With their own places. Obviously, here in the Territory, I've got some staff that are really pleased and really happy to have a job to start with, whereas I've got others that are really happy to have a job that can support them with the stage of life that they're at in doing things that they are required to do or need to do as they travel along. So really, for me, a lot of it's around understanding the individuals in the team, but also understanding the organisational requirements and the distinct needs of the work team, as well as the needs of the individual. So thank you for that. And we've got our first crowd sourced question here. So this one I might throw to you first up, Subho. So what is being done to support hiring from the regions to do roles that can be done outside of Canberra, or do you see the APS staying Canberra-centric?
Thanks, Gerrit. We definitely don't see the APS as staying Canberra-centric. A big part of the conversation we've just been having is to think about what it really means to apply flexibility across the service so that we can access talented people wherever they are and allow people to make a contribution from all over the country in different ways. So it's very firmly on our mind. I would say the kinds of things that we've already been talking about, which is how do you enable flexibility in different roles, and how do you show a real openness, as Gina was talking about, in different types of roles, senior roles as well as more junior roles, operational roles, policy roles. How do you open that up as a conversation that then allows you to access people where they are at, and allows the kind of conversations that we've been talking about. So I think the flexibility conversation is an incredibly important precursor, but then of course making sure that our hiring practices reflect that, and that we are genuinely open to making sure that we can connect to people all the way across the country.
Thanks, Subho. Katrina, anything to add? Oh, your lights are off.
I know.
That went incredibly poorly.
Yeah, look, I think it's certainly from a government service delivery perspective, very important to us that we're recruiting locally and regionally, and even more so that recruitment reflects the local communities and people where we're delivering those services to. So that's certainly been a key focus of ours. I think in the Northern Territory, we're often competing for the same very small pool of people through our recruitment initiatives. So there's certainly a challenge for us around becoming a bit more innovative in how we might attract and recruit and retain people into, in particular, our regional and remote areas. And I'm really keen to continue to work with Gerrit and his colleagues, as we do currently, around how we might be able to collaborate or join up our services in a more practical way to achieve that.
And Gerrit, thanks. I just picking up a number of those points that both Subho and Katrina made. we are very conscious that we are only going to serve all the breadth of Australian communities where our people are reflective of, diverse, understand and can bring to bear their experience and their knowledge. And so we not only seek to have members of our team in all of our various offices contributing across the work, we are also recruiting people who, for instance, an economist who was working with a partner in a very remote part of South Australia approached us and was able to really contribute to our economics team, and she's working using basically remote connections or all the virtual connections all the time, 100% of the time, to do the work. And so it is, we are totally open to this. COVID probably also just happened by sheer need to push a lot of the means of doing this even better. But the ACCC also has, going back to one of the aspects, I mean, Subho initially spoke about measures for Indigenous recruitment. We have a strong commitment to increasing our recruitment, but in addition to growing and providing all the opportunities for development across all, both Indigenous recruitment and all areas of diversity in our service. So both reflecting a geographic spread and as broad as possible, a reflection of the Australian community.
Thanks, Gina. I'd probably just like to say, I think we'll never escape Canberra fully. And I'm saying this as a person, and I probably feel some pity here because I can only imagine how Katrina's week has probably looked. But with Parliament sitting this week, you're probably not aware that a lot of the senior public servants up here have been up very early trying to respond to parliamentary questions on notice, live issues briefs and the like that happen as part of the parliamentary process. So whilst there is some massive advantages for having people spread all over the country, sometimes as well it can be a little bit more challenging as the process of government come through. But certainly it'll get better in a couple of weeks actually, when daylight savings so down south go back to proper times. But just at the moment it's a bit difficult. But in saying that, I came to the territory as part of a decentralised program, so it's not currently I guess as formally on the government's agenda, but I know that a lot of agencies are looking at the best way to get people is to try and find the people where they actually are. So there will be a lot more I think opportunities for things that have been considered Canberra roles outside of that. I know people that have taken the sea change and all of those sort of things, and agencies have said to them, well, we don't want to lose you, where do you want to go, how can we support you with that? So those people will start to develop local teams, I'm sure, and develop it all up. So it'll be an interesting few years, I think, going forward to see how it all comes up. Subho, but probably the next question I might start with you as well. This is probably because we do enjoy up here in the Northern Territory a very unique outdoor lifestyle, I'd probably say. So this question goes to the media and research talking about a 4-day work week, increasing productivity. And as a model employer, will the APS be trialling this?
Yeah, thanks, Gerrit. So I've also read a bit about the 4-day work week and the way in which people might look to shuffle their hours within an existing hours allocation, or look to go part-time and do 4 on that basis. So there are different models even within that. I think that that's something that is increasingly part of the broader conversation. I think that it's difficult again to be prescriptive about that beyond kind of noting that it's something that is part of this kind of broader sense of the world of work is changing. We need to think through that very, very carefully. The government has committed to a APS-wide bargaining process at the moment, and that bargaining process is just getting underway in March, and I'm sure that part of the conversation in that bargaining process will go to different models of work as well and how they might apply in different parts of the service.
Thanks, Subho. Gina, did you have anything else to?
At the moment, the options we sort of embrace in this regard, we do have quite a range of our people who are working part-time, and you know from their footer the days that they're in the office, and we have had quite a number of job share arrangements as well, and in addition condensed hours are offered for most roles. I also just embrace it. We have all seen really significant changes in the way we work in the last few years, and it's just continuing to happen. I think rather than be concerned about it, it offers lots of opportunities to work in different ways. And we know we need to adapt, that people will otherwise find other workplaces if we don't adapt. And so we need to embrace it and make it work.
Katrina, anything to add there?
No, not from me, Gerrit.
No worries. I might go to the next question as well. What can be done to improve recruiting processes? Is there a plan in place to speed this up so we're not losing staff or waiting for months for results? I might sort of touch on some recent experience in this one just to begin with. So obviously our agency is a relatively new agency in the scheme of things, having only been stood up in 2019. So we're going through now, coming away from shared services from PM&C and developing a few of those our own. What that does mean is that hopefully we will soon start to see some expedition of some of the recruitment processes. I know sometimes it's not actually the recruitment processes that in my space that have been the hold up. It's been other things like security clearances and police checks, of which they're a little bit more challenging and out of an individual's agency's hands. But I know that our agency is looking at different ways to be able to streamline those recruitment processes as well, and provide supports to managers too, who are generally doing a recruitment process because they're down staff, and so they're desperately trying to do the recruitment process at the same time. They're already understaffed and take themselves offline or take people offline to do those processes. So certainly we are looking at different strategies to be able to do that. We've got now HR staff based in the territory in NIAA, which I think will assist the process, and recruitment experts, so that we can move as quickly as we can while still satisfying the legislation and the requirements that we work under. Katrina.
Yeah, great question. This is feels like it's been a challenge of ours for quite some time now, and unfortunately I think is one of the negatives coming out of COVID, where lots of people realised how far away they were living from their families and friends, and have made moves back. So some of the things that we're trialling at Services Australia, and in particular around some of the challenges that we're working through in Alice Springs at the moment, is to rethink how we engage potential applicants. So I'm not sure anyone's truly enamored with the idea of going to seek.com and filling in their application paperwork and those sorts of things, where there's not really an opportunity to ask questions about what sorts of work there might be in an agency, or what some of the employment conditions might look like, and or what's my opportunity to impact socially or elsewhere within my community. So we're trialling some things at the moment, including a pop-up recruitment centre where people can literally just walk in and talk to staff and ask all of the things that you might think are silly questions, or that you want to do a bit of myth busting about, and also get a feel for the sort of people that you might be working with, because they're the people that will be talking to you when you come into that walk-in recruitment centre. And then we're able to help people engage with our agency, as Gerrit said, still following the legislation, the merit protection, merit principles, but just in a way that I don't want to say is a bit more sort of territory-like, but that's how it's been described, that it's probably a bit more welcoming and engaging space for people to recruit into. The other part of that initiative is providing opportunities to work on temporary or non-ongoing contracts initially, as a way to experience the agency and the types of work before people make that decision to apply for permanent or other type of employment tenure. So I don't think we've got all the answers. I'm not sure that anyone does, and how we speed up some things like police checks and security checks and getting people ID, still areas for us to innovate in.
Gina or Subho, did you have anything to add to that one?
Gerrit, perhaps just in terms of new ways we give people an opportunity to see what it would be like to work with us. We have an internship program, and we also have diversity objectives with our internship program, so that people can come in and have experience with us, and then we hope will be interested to return and work with us. In addition, we have a very active graduate program where we bring in a group of young people who then move around, rotate around different parts of what we're doing, and then have an opportunity to work with teams where they want to settle, and they can move between offices as well. And we've also been using both the external and internal mobility register to give opportunities to people. We, of course, follow all appropriate procedures with recruitment, but there are ways in which we're giving, across all the roles really, an ability for people to try what it's like to work with us and then make a decision.
Thanks, Gina. Anything to add
Connected,
there, Subho?
This is connected to the flexibility point that we need to make sure that we take the formalities seriously. Merit is important, and that we recruit in the right way. But with that as the guiding principle, there's more flexibility in what we can do than sometimes we give ourselves credit for. And as we kind of open up our minds a little bit to what you can do, we find that some of the constraints have been self-imposed constraints. And so I think that's really been brought out in the other two contributions.
Thanks, Subho. This is the last question. It's going to be really quick fire because we're almost out of time. Maybe one or two each. What are the skills you think the APS workforce will need to develop for the future world of work? Might start with you, Subho, and then we'll work our way back here.
Sure, thanks, Gerrit. Look, I'm a big one for thinking that the kind of fundamentals endure and then you adapt that to the circumstances. So it seems to me that we're still going to be looking for keen, enthusiastic, critical thinkers who can be problem solvers and get stuff done. All of that is still absolutely going to apply. And then you think about some different domains of expertise, of course, data, digital, service delivery, adapted to contemporary circumstances and individuals. But it seems to me that we're still essentially after a kind of skill set and a kind of mode of working, and then you kind of adapt that as you go.
Thanks, Subho. Gina?
I too also show sort of continuity, really. So a curious mind, and as part of that, I include being prepared to speak up internally to test what thinking and points like that in a full and frank way. And then secondly, because it's so important, our community-facing engagement, just empathy and communication skills. It is important to do what we are tasked and mandated to do.
Thanks, Gina. Katrina?
I was going to say collaboration and co-design. I think people's expectations of how government services are delivered is changing, and there's also greater impetus on us to deliver the services of government in a more efficient and effective way. What that means for us working in the service will really come down to our ability to collaborate, connect and co-design, not just with other APS colleagues, but with the communities and others that we work with, to be part of the process about what that looks like where they live.
Thanks, Katrina. And for me, I think I touched on them a little bit, but those communication and people skills, I think, are going to be really essential as we go through the next sort of phase, as we learn how to collaborate and co-design and partner with community, particularly up here in the Territory, but even more broadly across Australia. And then I think the other one that people are going to need is a flexibility and a willingness to learn, and the ability to adapt to different situations that come up, and not try and take that one size fits all approach. So that is going to end our panel discussion there. I'd like to thank all of our speakers, Subho, Katrina and Gina, for joining us today. And I'd like to thank all of you for watching and contributing to the State of the Service Roadshow event for the Northern Territory. Please keep an eye out for a follow-up email from today's session as well. It'll have information about how you can share your own story of working in the Australian Public Service, like the stories we saw earlier today in the video. And also, it'll also have a link to the recording of today's session. So the session concludes the State of the Service Roadshow. All other sessions can also be viewed on the Australian Public Service Commission website. So thanks very much, everybody, and have a good day.